Hello and welcome to this week's episode of On Buddhism. This week, we'll be reading and discussing the Heart Sutra. There are two versions of this sutra, and they are both said to have been translated into Chinese from Sanskrit by Xuanzang, a famous 7th century translator of Sanskrit Buddhist texts. But the original Sanskrit manuscripts have been lost, and the Sanskrit versions that exist today have been reconstructed from the Chinese. There is much heated debate over where it was first composed, but it was either in China or in India before the 7th century. Today we will be using the short version. The title of the sutra in Sanskrit is the Prajnaparamita Hridaya, and it is quite short. You'll find that in English it only takes up about one typed page. Perhaps due to its brevity, but also due to its rich discourse on emptiness and its function as a dharani, the Heart Sutra is regarded by some scholars as the single most studied, copied, and recited sutra in all of East Asian Buddhism. You'll note that I do not have my co-host Docs with me today, and that's because, as you'll see, the sutra and its discussion are quite short and hopefully straightforward. We hope you enjoy. Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, when practicing deeply the Prajnaparamita, perceives that all 5 skandhas are empty and is saved from all suffering and distress. Shariputra, form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. That which is form is emptiness. That which is emptiness, form. The same is true of feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness. Shariputra, all dharmas are marked with emptiness. They do not appear or disappear, are not tainted or pure, do not increase or decrease. Therefore, an emptiness, no form, no feelings, no perceptions, no impulses, no consciousness. No eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no color, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind, no realm of eyes, and so forth until no realm of mind consciousness. No ignorance and also no extinction of it, and so forth until no old age and death, and no extinction of them. No suffering, no origination, no stopping, no path, no cognition, and no attainment, and nothing to attain. The Bodhisattva depends on Prajnaparamita, and the mind is no hindrance. Without any hindrance, no fears exist. Far apart from every perverted view, one dwells in nirvana. In the 3 worlds, all Buddhas depend on Prajnaparamita, and attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Therefore, know that Prajnaparamita is the great transcendent mantra, is the great bright mantra, is the utmost mantra, is the supreme mantra, which is able to relieve all suffering, and is true, not false. So proclaim the Prajnaparamita mantra. Proclaim the mantra which says, Gate, Gate, Parasamgate Bodhisvaha. Gate, Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate Bodhisvaha. Gate, Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate Bodhisvaha. That was the short version of the Heart Sutra. As you can see, it is indeed quite short. One of the first things that I want to bring up about this text is that the short version of the Heart Sutra deviates from the regular sutra format which we might be familiar with. This format that I'm referring to is beginning with, "Thus have I heard," and then having the Buddha or another character address an audience, both of which end up being named in the texts. However, in this case, Avalokiteshvara is referring to himself in the 3rd person, and he's addressing Shariputra. Beginning with a discussion of Avalokiteshvara, you'll remember from episode 17, which I will link in the show notes, that Avalokiteshvara is the Bodhisattva of compassion and mercy, and you'll know that his name in Chinese is Guanyin, and his name in Japanese is Kannon. Additionally, he also changes genders in statuary and imagery, such that in China, Guanyin is typically depicted as a woman, and in Japan, Kannon is typically depicted as being androgynous or gender ambiguous. It's no mistake that Avalokiteshvara is at the center of what is regarded as one of the most popular and deep and rich discourses on the Prajnaparamita. Avalokiteshvara is a very important figure in the Mahayana, and therefore is usually the figurehead or the poster boy for this Prajnaparamita wisdom. I keep mentioning this word Prajnaparamita, and it's included in the title of the sutra, Prajnaparamita Hridaya. So what does this Prajnaparamita actually mean? It's actually Sanskrit for the perfection of wisdom. Prajna is wisdom, and paramita is perfection of, the practice of making polished and perfect. Prajnaparamita is very popular as a concept and as a textual tradition in Mahayana Buddhism, and is often thought of as the key contribution of Mahayana that sets it apart from the early non-sectarian traditions and from the Theravada. The body of Prajnaparamita texts and rituals and doctrines has important themes dealing with emptiness, with the bodhisattva ideal and characteristics of a bodhisattva, with the illusoriness of the dharmas and the phenomena around us, with the two truths doctrine, which we've talked about in our discussion of emptiness, and also with the concept of suchness, ta, as it's said in Sanskrit, which we haven't really discussed quite yet, but deals with things as they are and deals with the characteristics of something that are not immediately apparent based on a visual inspection. If you remember our discussion of the 10 suchnesses, these are the appearance of something, the nature of something, the entity or embodiment of that something, power of that something, influence, internal cause, secondary cause, latent effect, manifest effect, and consistency from beginning to end. These are what you might document as the entire trajectory or life of a certain thing in reality. And remember, when we're saying thing in reality, we're referring to small d dharmas. Remember that dharma has several different uses and definitions, but in the case of small d dharma, it's usually referring to anything that can be named in reality. So not only does it include physical objects, but it also includes feelings, sensations, emotions, concepts and ideas, objects of the mind, objects of the senses, all kinds of different things. Everything, all phenomena in reality are known as small d dharmas. The Prajnaparamita texts, rituals, doctrines, and literature all deal with diagnosing the nature of all dharmas and deals with regarding those as empty and regarding those based on their suchness. This is a practice and a doctrine of trying to observe and perceive and understand all of those 10 different things for every single phenomena in reality. This is, in its collective whole, omniscience, according to the Mahayana tradition, and thus enlightenment. So remember that this sutra addresses Shariputra. Shariputra has been the whipping boy, or the one wearing the dunce cap in a lot of other Mahayana sutras. And it's because Shariputra represents the pinnacle of understanding in the earlier teachings, such as Four Noble Truths. But as Mahayana develops and has more refined perspectives and readings of the earlier teachings, and thus also has different expansions and expoundings on those teachings, Shariputra then becomes the representative with which those things are critiqued and are weighed. So Shariputra is an audience stand-in for those traditionalists in the Buddhist tradition who will say, but what about the Four Noble Truths? But what about the Dharma seals? But what about desire, suffering, and the path to the end of suffering? He also represents the Arhat ideal, which is held much more closely now in the Theravada tradition and was held by some also in the earlier non-sectarian traditions. And so he's also used as a way of demonstrating the superiority of the Bodhisattva tradition. In any case, the Heart Sutra does not do a lot of this debate with Shariputra. In fact, Shariputra has no dialogue at all. It simply addresses Shariputra, and it simply is a means of Avalokiteshvara explaining the Prajnaparamita to him, and he doesn't get any dialogue or any response. Though it does expound the Prajnaparamita superiority ideal that is common in Prajnaparamita texts and in the Mahayana textual tradition, it does not have a debate or have a discussion between Shariputra and the speaker. And therefore, it's complicated as to the origins and the place of origin and the time of origin of the Heart Sutra, because it doesn't have those typical characteristics that historians and that philologists would look to in the text to say this is where and when this sutra came from. Nevertheless, it does have some famous lines that are typically recited even on their own as a piece of the Heart Sutra, just as a quick blessing. One of those famous lines is, Shariputra, form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. That which is form is emptiness. That which is emptiness, form. This line in particular is very popular in East Asian Buddhism and widely popular in East Asian culture as a whole. What it is doing in the text is it is emptying out form, and it's emptying out emptiness itself. And this is where we have the discussion of the Two Truths doctrine that you might see. For a refresher on emptiness and on the Two Truths doctrine, I'll direct you to Right on Buddhism episode 33, which I will also link in the show notes today. But essentially, the idea is that Everything is empty, indeed. However, that doesn't mean that nothing exists at all. Instead of nothing existing at all, which would negate the things that we see before us, the things that we experience as objects of the senses day in and day out, it says, instead, those things undergo non-arising. They don't arise because that would mean they exist. This very sutra says things do not appear or disappear. Instead, they undergo non-arising, which is a different form of appearing in the world, which allows for relative continuity and for sense objects, but renders them illusory, renders them as empty. And so this discussion of form is emptiness, emptiness is form, is doing that same thing to try and demonstrate the illusoriness of all dharmas, all phenomena are shunyata, are emptiness. Therefore, this text is regarded as one of the most refined discourses on emptiness that you'll see in the Mahayana tradition. It's very succinct and concise, and it gets right to the point. It empties out everything. In addition to emptying out form and objects of the senses, it also empties out the entire capital D Dharma. Remember that capital D Dharma refers to the teaching of the Buddha, the laws of the universe, the laws of reality, and it regards the Four Noble Truths, it regards the senses, the sense faculties, the sense objects, the sense realms as being empty. It regards suffering, awakening, the Four Noble Truths, desire, suffering, all as empty. And therefore, all phenomena in the world, in reality, all things are empty. Now this poses an interesting and important question. If the Dharma is empty, if suffering and awakening and origination and cessation are all empty, even the Four Noble Truths and the five skandhas and everything that we've been learning about from the Buddha for centuries is all empty, what do we do? Well, this relates to the fact that even though emptiness regards things as being impermanent and having no unchanging nature and being empty of a self, it doesn't regard them as not existing. First off, according to the Two Truths doctrine, there are things that exist provisionally. There are things that exist and are perceivable as objects of the senses, including objects of the mind. However, it should also be noted that even though the teachings here are being critiqued for being inherently dualistic, it's often remarked in the texts, especially the Mahayana ones, that the Buddha teaches through dualities. He teaches through drawing distinctions between this and that. He teaches by delighting people, by saying that this is what's true and right and this is what's wrong. Therefore, even if the Dharma is empty, we still have a path forward. It doesn't negate the path of the Dharma or the path of enlightenment. Rather, it just tells you what the nature of it is so that you don't make any mistake and so that you don't become attached to or desirous of anything that the path entails. You could become desirous of awakening. And what happens when you become desirous and attached to that? You don't get it. There's no possible way to get enlightenment and awakening if you are desirous and attached to it. And that presents an interesting problem. How do I walk the path of enlightenment as though I'm not walking towards a specific goal with a specific purpose? That's the entire point of this practice. That's the entire point of emptying out the Dharma, is to remind yourself that there is no goal, there is nothing to be attained, there is no one to attain it. This is an elevation of emptiness to the highest level of realization and to the highest level of enlightenment and to the highest level of doctrinal importance and significance in the Mahayana tradition. At the end, the sutra then hails this as the most important truth that all bodhisattvas rely on. It hails this as the most important root teaching of Buddhism, of the Dharma, and it elevates it to the status of Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. This is, in the texts, perfect, complete enlightenment with no remainder. This is regarded as the enlightenment of a fully realized Buddha who is about to leave samsara and achieve perfect nirvana without remainder. This is often left untranslated in the texts because the translation is something like perfect, diamond-like, complete Sambodhi. Sambodhi is, in this case, another word for enlightenment, but what it really means and refers to is actually something like concentration, or a breakdown of the duality between the meditator and the object of meditation. This sort of ideal doesn't really come up as the primary ideal of practitioners and of the Dharma and of the sutras until the development and refinement of the Mahayana textual tradition. This sutra plays a part in doing that. Because this sutra hypes up the Prajnaparamita model so much, it ends up influencing other texts and also practice and ritual to place superiority and significance on emptiness and on the bodhisattva model, as opposed to on suffering and awakening and desire and cessation and the arhat model, as the earlier non-sectarian traditions do. Finally, the sutra closes with a mantra. For a refresher on what a mantra is, I'll refer you to Bright on Buddhism episode 24, What Are Mantra? A mantra, in short, for the purposes of this discussion, is like a short phrase that carries some sort of significant magical power. This magical power can be to exorcise demons, to bless or purify a space, or in some way to transfer the merit of the Buddha to the practitioner. We've talked about the esoteric Buddhist implications that are inherent in this, such as that by saying the speech of the Buddha directly with your mouth, you become the Buddha saying those things with the Buddha's mouth. And additionally, there's the idea in the Buddhist philosophy of language and speech, which we discuss in episode 18, which regards some words as having positive karmic power that other words don't have. The mantra at the end reads, Gate Gate Perasam Gate Bodhisvaha 3 times over. And it's usually meant to be untranslated, but it can be translated to mean gone, gone, everyone gone to the other shore, awakening, svaha. The other shore is a very common image for nirvana. Once you've gone to nirvana with no remainder, you can't come back. You've crossed the river that has the tumultuous waters, or the ocean that has tumultuous waters of suffering and desire, and you've made it out. You've made it off of that body of water, and you have defeated suffering, aging, illness, and death. This part of the sutra is also a dharani on its own. So a mantra and a dharani are very closely related, as we talk about in episode 18, but they're not the exact same thing. The dharani will be recited as an incantation or as a spell with the purpose of eliciting some sort of positive response in the world, and often the content doesn't matter. In the case of mantras, sometimes content does matter. In any case, this dharani is part of the dedication or convocation of the text. This is what we might think of as celebrating the awakening that Avalokiteshvara has achieved, because his awakening is our awakening, because we have this text to refer to, because he's given us this teaching, and we have it to learn from and recite and to copy and to translate. That means that we have also achieved this prajna paramita. We have also perfected our wisdom, and we've come to a realization of emptiness in some way. And so the mantra version, the content of celebrating gone, gone, everyone meaning all sentient beings, is sort of like invoking all sentient beings that they have finally reached their enlightenment and we're all celebrating. The dharani aspect, which would not care that much for the content, but for the actual syllables and the power that those syllables hold, would then ignore this everyone, all sentient beings enlightenment dimension, and it would instead rely on the power of the actual syllables, Gate Gate Parasam Gate Bodhisvaha. A little bit of discussion on the function of the Heart Sutra in Buddhist ritual is due here as well. As we've talked about, there is a dharani aspect to that final part, but the entire sutra is often recited as well. The recitation of this sutra is very convenient because the sutra is short, and it's also very powerful because of how they regard Avalokiteshvara and because of how the discourse of emptiness is developed in the text. And so in that regard, this text is recited as a blessing of a space or of a person. It's recited, for example, at funerals or at the christening of new homes or the christening of new businesses or new temples. And the idea is that it offers protection, and it also blesses and cleanses a space and purifies it of bad karma, of hell dwellers and hungry ghosts, and other localized creatures and demons and characters. I bring up this issue of localized characters like demons and bad spirits because the Heart Sutra in East Asia is also often used to exterminate those and to cast those away from a space. That being the case, the Heart Sutra is regarded as becoming a very highly localized text, meaning that no matter what sort of syncretized religious practice is going on in a space that combines elements from Buddhism and from local religions, the Heart Sutra is often an important ritual component because of the power that it is said that the words contain. Even in some cases, the written text is regarded as having protection and magical powers. Oftentimes, you'll see that people will actually write the Heart Sutra on their skin or they will wear it on their clothes, because that is said to afford some sort of protection against evil spirits just for having the words on you. This will be written sometimes in classical Chinese, into which it was translated, or it can be written into Japanese. It can be written into any language that the Heart Sutra has been translated into or exists in, even English. But it said that the text itself, each character that communicates the meaning and the word of the sutra, is powerful in its own way and protects you against suffering, ignorance, bad spirits, hell dwellers, hungry ghosts, and other things that might assail you in some way. This has been a reading and discussion of the Heart Sutra. We hope you've enjoyed. Just for fun, since I can read it, and because Japanese Buddhism is the target of my study, I have decided to also include my own Japanese recitation of the Heart Sutra at the end here. I hope you enjoy. Makahanya hara mita shingyo Kanji zai bosatsu gyojin hanya hara mita jisho kengo onkai kudo isai ku yakushari shi shiki fui ku fui shiki sokuze ku sokuze shiki juso gyo shiki yaku bunyo ze shari shi ze shoho kuso fu metsu fu fujo fuzo fugen zeko kuchu mu shiki muju sogyo shiki mugen ni bizetsu shin ni mu shiki shoko mi soku ho mugen kai naishi mui shiki kai mu myo yaku mu myo jin naishi muro shi yaku muro shi jin mu kushu metsu do mu chi yaku mu toku imu sho toku kobo dai satta e hanya hara mita koshin mukege komu kufu ondri isai tendo muso kugyo ne han sanze shobutsu e hanya hara mita kotoku anoku tara sanmyaku sanbodai kochi hanya hara mita ze dai jinshu ze dai myo shu ze mujo shu ze muto do shu no jo isai ku shinjitsu fuko kosetsu hanya hara mita shu soku setsu shu watsu gyate hara so gyate boji so akahanya shingyo. My name is Nick Bright, scholar of East Asian religions and the voice of Hearer.
And I'm Docs, editor, question asker, and voice of Hermit.
And this has been Bright on Buddhism. Thank you for listening. If you like our podcast, or if you have a question you'd like us to discuss, we'd love to hear from you. Please consider leaving a comment or review, subscribing, or joining us on social media. Email us at bright.on.buddhism@gmail.com. Tweet us at brightbuddhism. And join us on our Discord server, The Hidden Sangha, link in description. As always, citations and resources for this episode can be found in the show notes. Thank you. See you next time.
Thank you very much.